marble corridors of the U.S. Capitol carried a strange tension that morning, an echo of power wrapped in silence. Footsteps whispered across the polished floors as Speaker Mike Johnson moved swiftly toward the press briefing room, his aides trailing close behind. The air buzzed with rumor. Every reporter sensed something historic was about to break. Johnson's face was calm but rigid. His jaw tightened the way it did before every fight. The speaker's seal gleamed under the bright lights as he stepped behind the podium. Cameras clicked. The room fell into a breathless hush. "Today," he said, voice measured and cold, "I am announcing the immediate removal of Representative Jasmine Crockett from the House Judiciary Committee." Gasps sliced through the air. Reporters shouted questions at once. Johnson raised a hand for silence. "This action is necessary," he continued. "Representative Crockett has repeatedly disrupted committee decorum and engaged in behavior unbecoming of a member of this House. The integrity of our committees must be preserved." The words landed like hammer strikes. Reporters pressed forward, demanding details on what violations. Was she warned? Who authorized this? Johnson offered nothing. "My decision," he said, "is final." Across the Capitol, Jasmine Crockett watched the broadcast in her office. Her staff froze, eyes darting toward her. She didn't flinch. Without a word, she reached for her phone, typed, and hit post. "Speaker Johnson removed me not for misconduct, but for doing my job. Asking questions a judicial nominee couldn't answer. If fulfilling my constitutional duty is now called disorder, maybe the disorder lies elsewhere." Within minutes, the message exploded online. Hashtags, Crockett removal, Constitution on trial, trended nationwide. Every network picked it up. Pundits filled airtime with speculation. Inside the Speaker's office, Johnson's chief of staff entered, pale. "Sir, Representatives Armstrong, Buck, and Fitzpatrick are here. They say it's urgent." "Tell them 4 o'clock, Johnson replied, eyes on his papers. "They're waiting now. They won't leave." Before he could answer, the desk phone buzzed. The House Minority Leader's voice cut through the static, sharp, composed, furious. "Mike, this is beyond the line. You can't strip a minority member from a standing committee without a vote or consultation. That's not procedure. That's authoritarian." "I'm well within my authority," Johnson said, forcing calm. "This isn't about authority," she shot back. "It's about precedent. You've opened a door you'll regret." A knock interrupted the call. Johnson's legislative director stepped in, holding a phone. "Sir, Armstrong just told the press he might resign from judiciary in protest. Buck and Fitzpatrick may join him." Johnson froze. Losing 3 members would flip the committee's balance, handing control to Democrats. He ended the call abruptly. "I'll call you back." Meanwhile, outside her office, Jasmine Crockett stepped into a sea of cameras. The sunlight caught the edge of her crimson blazer. Her voice carried steady and clear. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about Congress doing its job. Oversight isn't disorder, it's duty. If asking hard questions embarrasses the powerful, that's a reflection on them, not me." A reporter shouted, "Have any Republicans reached out?" She nodded. "Yes, some of my colleagues are concerned. They should be, because this precedent endangers everyone." Back in the Speaker's suite, the 3 Republicans entered. Faces grave, Armstrong spoke first. "Mr. Speaker, with respect, this was wrong." Crockett didn't break any rule. Her questioning was tough but professional. "We were all there," Buck folded his arms. "We spend every day warning about government overreach, and now we're doing it ourselves." Fitzpatrick leaned forward. "Sir, my constituents are calling already. They think you punished her for embarrassing a nominee." "It looks bad," Johnson's patience snapped. "Representative Crockett's conduct was within the rules," Armstrong cut in. "You know it." The room went still. Outside, Washington, D.C. was erupting. Legal analysts, journalists, former staffers, everyone weighed in. A former GOP counsel told CNN, "In 30 years, I've never seen a speaker remove a minority member without a vote. It's an institutional breach." Progressive outlets spliced together clips of Crockett's questioning under the banner, the voice they tried to silence. Then came an unexpected twist, and conservative legal groups began defending her. "We may not share her politics," one organization said, "but rigorous questioning is essential to the confirmation process. Silencing oversight threatens judicial integrity." By late afternoon, the rebellion was bipartisan. 6 Republicans publicly criticized the Speaker. Then the shockwave. The judicial nominee at the center of it all contacted the White House to discuss withdrawing his nomination. For Johnson, it was a political detonation. His power move was collapsing under its own weight. An emergency GOP conference convened, not by Johnson, but by his own members. The atmosphere was electric, brittle. Moderates huddled in corners. Hardliners paced in silence. When the speaker entered, applause was sparse. He took the podium, straightening his notes. "Colleagues," he began, "today's action was taken to preserve order." "Point of order," interrupted Representative Peterson, voice sharp. "Under what authority?" "The Speaker's office has wide discretion." "That's false," said Congresswoman Miller, a constitutional lawyer. "Standing committee assignments require caucus consultation or an ethics ruling." "You acted unilaterally." Murmurs spread. "These were extraordinary circumstances," Johnson insisted. "What circumstances?" Congressman Davis demanded. "I watched the footage." Crockett followed every rule. "Are we punishing competence now?" Before Johnson could respond, Chairman Jim Jordan entered, holding a transcript. "Our staff reviewed every line of Crockett's questioning," he said. "There were no violations, not one. If what she did warrants removal, then half of us would have been expelled years ago." Gasps rippled through the room. Jordan's credibility was undeniable. "So," Miller pressed, "if there were no violations, why was she removed?" Johnson hesitated. Armstrong spoke quietly. "Because outside donors complained. Groups aligned with the nominee's backers pushed for it. This wasn't about order, it was about optics." The air turned heavy. Then the conference chair entered, holding printed emails. "Mr. Speaker," he said softly, "Politico just published correspondence between your office and Federalist Society officials, discussing, quote, finding a procedural method to remove Crockett before the next round of hearings." The room erupted in disbelief. Even Johnson's allies looked away. The suggestion of outside interference was political poison. Then a voice rose above the chaos. Congressman Graves, the elder statesman. "I've served under 4 speakers," he said. "We've disagreed, but we've always respected the rules that protect this institution. Today those rules were broken." He looked directly at Johnson. "Unless this decision is reversed, I'll resign from Judiciary." 3 others stood beside him. The message was unmistakable. Back down or lose your majority. Then, in a moment of procedural drama, the House parliamentarian entered, an almost unheard of act during a partisan meeting. "Mr. Speaker," she said formally, "I have reviewed the rules. Your unilateral removal of Representative Crockett lacks authorization and deviates from House precedent. Without a full vote or ethics ruling, it is procedurally invalid." Silence consumed the room. Johnson's authority, and perhaps his career, hung suspended in that stillness. The parliamentarian's words hung in the air like a verdict. Every member in the room knew what it meant. The Speaker's decision carried no legal weight. For a long, frozen moment, Mike Johnson didn't speak. His eyes moved slowly across the room, searching for loyalty, but the faces staring back were unreadable, cold, wary, and exhausted. The silence pressed against him until the only sound was the faint hum of the lights above. Finally, he straightened his notes. "This meeting is adjourned," he said, his voice low. But the words carried no authority anymore. Members began filing out. No applause, no acknowledgement. Only the dull echo of retreating footsteps. Outside, reporters swarmed the hallway. News alerts flashed across every screen. House parliamentarian declares Speaker's move against Rep. Crockett invalid. Within minutes, the entire Capitol was a storm of motion. Staffers rushed between offices. Phones rang nonstop. Political anchors went live on every network. By sunset, the story had evolved from scandal to spectacle. On MSNBC, a legal analyst declared, "This isn't just a procedural error. It's a constitutional crisis in miniature. A speaker ignored the rules to silence a member. That's an abuse of power." Even conservative networks struggled to defend it. One commentator sighed. Johnson overplayed his hand. "The optics are terrible. It looks like a vendetta." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett stood before a crowd of cameras on the Capitol steps. The golden evening light touched her shoulders as she spoke. "I didn't come to Congress to make friends with power," she said, calm and steady. "I came here to serve the people who sent me, and to protect the Constitution that protects all of us. That document doesn't bend for speakers, senators, or presidents. It stands taller than all of them." Her words ricocheted across the internet. Millions watched the clip within hours. Celebrities reposted it. Civil rights leaders issued statements of support. Even a few Republican members liked her post, quietly but publicly enough to be noticed. Inside the Speaker's office, Johnson stared at the television, expressionless. His chief of staff spoke carefully. "Sir, the conference is fracturing. The Judiciary members are threatening to boycott hearings unless Crockett is reinstated, and the Majority Whip wants an emergency leadership meeting." Johnson didn't answer. His phone buzzed again, a call from the Majority Leader. He let it ring twice before answering. "Mike," the voice said, "this is spiraling. You've got to fix it. The donors are panicking, the caucus is furious, and the media's eating us alive." "It's temporary," Johnson muttered. "This will blow over." "Not this time," came the reply. "They're drafting a motion of no confidence. You need to get ahead of it. Fast." That night, while Washington burned with speculation, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her office. Papers were stacked across the table. Copies of hearing transcripts, procedural manuals, statements from allies. But her eyes weren't on them. She was staring at a small framed photograph on her desk, a picture of her law school graduation, her mother beside her, smiling proudly. "You taught me never to back down," she whispered. "So I won't." At dawn the next day, she walked into the Judiciary Committee room, the same one she'd been expelled from just 24 hours earlier. The guards hesitated. The chair looked uncertain. Then from behind the dais, Jim Jordan spoke up. "Representative Crockett," he said, voice steady, "you are recognized as a member of this committee under House precedent and parliamentarian authority. Please take your seat." Applause erupted from both sides of the aisle. Reporters scrambled for position. Cameras rolled. Crockett sat down, adjusted her microphone, and smiled faintly. "Good morning," she said. "Let's get back to work." The moment became an instant icon, replayed endlessly across social media, dissected in commentary shows printed on magazine covers. By noon, Speaker Johnson's office was surrounded by reporters demanding comment. His communications director read a brief statement. "The Speaker respects the ruling of the parliamentarian and the decision of the Judiciary Committee to reinstate Representative Crockett. He remains committed to ensuring order and accountability in the House." But no one believed the calm tone. The damage was done. That evening, 3 moderate Republicans held a joint press conference, something almost unheard of. Representative Armstrong spoke first. "Our duty is not to protect political comfort, but constitutional integrity. We may disagree with our colleagues, but silencing them is not democracy. Today we stand with Representative Crockett, not as partisans, but as patriots." It was the statement that broke the dam. Within 48 hours, over a dozen Republican members called for new leadership elections. The Speaker's allies tried to rally, but even they sensed the inevitable. Behind closed doors, one senior member muttered, "It's over." The rooms turned on him. Late one evening, Johnson sat alone in the Speaker's private chamber. The Capitol dome glowed faintly through the window. His hands trembled as he picked up his pen. On his desk lay a single sheet of paper, a resignation letter drafted but unsigned. He hesitated, staring at the words. "Effective immediately. I resign as Speaker of the House of Representatives." He set the pen down. The air was still. Suddenly, a knock on the door. His chief of staff entered. "Sir, CNN's reporting that the Majority Whip and Conference Chair are calling a vote for tomorrow. They have the numbers." Johnson didn't look up. "Leave it," he said quietly. The aide hesitated. "Sir," I said, "leave it." The door closed softly behind him. For a long time, Johnson sat in silence. Finally, he signed the letter. The next morning, the House convened under extraordinary circumstances. The chamber was packed. Reporters filled the press gallery. Staffers lined the walls. The clerk stepped to the microphone. "Members will come to order. The Speaker has submitted his resignation, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. Johnson rose, walked slowly to the rostrum, and faced the chamber for the last time. "I did what I thought was right," he said, voice low. "Perhaps I was wrong. But I acted in the interest of preserving order, not chaos." Then he turned toward Jasmine Crockett's seat. Their eyes met for a single quiet moment. There was no gloating in hers, only resolve. He stepped down, his gavel clattering softly onto the desk. The chamber remained silent until he walked out. Moments later, the clerk announced, "Nominations for Speaker are now open." The House erupted in noise, cheers, chatter, disbelief. Across the aisle, reporters rushed toward Crockett. One shouted above the din, "Congresswoman, do you have any comment on the Speaker's resignation?" She paused, then said simply, "Accountability isn't revenge. It's restoration." Her words echoed through the chamber. Over the next week, Washington recalibrated. Editorials praised her restraint. Legal scholars called it a landmark defense of congressional independence. Universities invited her to speak about institutional integrity. The moment transcended party lines, a rare instance when the rules of democracy, long abused and bent, had finally fought back and won. 1 week later, Crockett stood again at the Judiciary Committee hearing. The same oak table, the same cameras. This time she faced a new witness, a corporate executive under investigation for political corruption. She leaned forward. "Let's begin," she said, voice steady. The cameras zoomed in. The nation watched, and for the first time in months, Congress felt like it was doing its job again. Outside the chamber, the autumn sun burned bright over the Capitol dome. Staffers passed in hurried silence. Reporters typed their stories, and somewhere, in a quiet office now emptied of power, a former speaker stared out his window, wondering when the floor beneath him had given way. But history had already made up its mind. What had started as an act of silencing had become a story of resurgence, one woman standing against institutional arrogance and winning. And as the lights dimmed on that turbulent chapter of American politics, one truth remained: power can silence a voice for a moment. But courage echoes long after the gavel falls.